This episode of Derek and Matt Love Comics recorded October 29th, 2018. Happy Halloween, everyone! You can listen to Derek and Matt Love Comics on all the usual places: Podbeam, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, and TuneIn. Contact the show at Derek and Matt Love Comics at gmail.com, facebook.com/Derek and Matt, Twitter at Derek and Matt, on Instagram at Derek and Matt, and watch our videos and listen to the show on YouTube at Derek and Matt Love Comics. Enjoy the show. Hey yo, comic book fans, it's Matt, and you're listening to Derek and Matt Love Comics, the show where two friends talk sci-fi, movies, animation, comic books, and all things we geek out about. With me is the man who will be staying up with me in the pumpkin patch this Halloween, Derek. How's it going, Derek?
Not too bad. Kind of looking forward to staying up all night in the hopes of seeing the Great Pumpkin.
Yeah, hopefully, we won't be giving up too much Halloween candy to do that.
Or rocks.
Yeah, there is always that. Lousy jerk adults. So quickly, before we get into the show and what we've been doing, we have a little announcement. As David Bowie said in the song Changes, and Black Sabbath said in the song Changes, and Motley Crue said in the song Time for Change, the times, they are rapidly becoming different. We've decided to get experimental with the show in hopes that we will improve it. The immediate change is that you're going to notice that we're not going to be doing a news segment anymore, although we do plan on having special news episodes should the occasion warrant it. Hey, let us know what you think of these changes as we tinker with the show over the next few weeks. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Let us know one way or the other. Maybe your opinion will affect what we end up doing. What have you been up to this week, Derek?
Oh, boy. Well, not really much. As always, did manage to get a few things done this past week, in regards to movies and television. I had pretty much taken a break for the last couple of months from watching anything that was on my unwatched DVD or Blu-ray rack. But this week I decided to actually watch a couple of things and managed to knock off my Blu-rays of Guillermo del Toro's Cronus, my Ready Player One Blu-ray, and the Creepshow DVD that I actually purchased for $5 in the Halloween sale display at Walmart at the beginning of the month.
That's a pretty good buy.
Yeah, it's, it was actually I think it was the first time I've ever seen the movie. I'm not 100% sure about that because a couple of the segments were familiar and I may have seen part of it on late night TV when I was in junior high. But it was kind of fun watching it. It was better than I expected. Because it's an anthology film, and those are very much hit or miss. But
yeah,
it was pretty good, and it had pretty good tone throughout the entire film. So yeah, that was fun. Ready Player One was fun watching that again. I think it's only the second time I've seen it, and yeah, it's a good, solid, fun Steven Spielberg film. The other one, though, is Cronos. Up until The Shape of Water came out, and I watched that at the beginning of this year, Cronos was the movie that I always said was my favorite Del Toro film. It's no longer my number one, but it very easily is my number two. It's actually one of my favorite vampire movies, too. I'm not sure if you've ever actually seen that one, though.
I have not. It is one of the few Del Toro films that I have not seen.
Oh, I really recommend it. The movie basically has most of what we would come to think of as Del Toro's tropes in it. It's really the ground zero for his film career. I mean, literally, it's his first movie. But it's really fun. One of the things I like about the movie is that it's a vampire film where the guy who turns into a vampire, is a fundamentally good person, and even though he turns into a vampire, he still basically stays a good person, which is something that really is a factor in a lot of Del Toro's films, where the monster is the decent good person. The scary person are the humans. They're the ones you have to fear.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the case in Shape of Water. That's definitely the case in... maybe not that the humans are the scary ones, but that you know, you can trust the monster in Hellboy. Yeah, I mean, that's...
Well, a lot of a lot of the villains in the first Hellboy film are Nazis, so, you know, humanity at its worst.
Yeah, but they're supernatural Nazis, so...
That's true.
But, I mean, that's definitely the case in Pan's Labyrinth, so...
Oh, yeah. Other than those 3 movies, I caught up on... I am caught up on last week's episode of Supergirl, which aired whenever we were recording last week. I caught up on that. I finally got to watch The Flash from this past Tuesday, although I did not watch that until very early this morning. And I also managed to, today before we started recording this, or actually just a few hours ago, I watched last week's Doctor Who and last night's episode of Doctor Who. And man, I am really loving this season.
Yeah, I watched last week's. I have not yet watched this week's, which I made the comment after watching last week's. Ooh, this is a really heavy episode. Don't worry, next week something with crazy spiders.
Yeah, last week's episode was really, really very good. I think it might be one of the best episodes of Doctor Who that I've ever seen.
Well, that's good to hear, because I thought it was... it gave me the feeling of like a Quantum Leap episode, and I'm a big fan of Quantum Leap, so...
Oh, I am too. It was very interesting because they haven't really done Okay, when Doctor Who started in 1963, the premise was that it was supposed to be an educational entertainment show to teach families and kids about history. And a lot of the first season storylines back then, because the original series was a serial and broken up into like 6 or more episodes that made up stories. And the first story was a time travel historical lesson. The only sci-fi element was the time travel and the TARDIS, because at this point the Doctor was not known to be an alien. It wasn't until the second story that they did in the original first season, which introduced the Daleks, that they started bringing in the idea of alien threats. So Doctor Who has long had a history of doing these historical episodes, but in the modern series, since the revival in 2005, a lot of the historical episodes have much more heavily focused on the science fiction elements. Like, for an example, the episode Vincent and the Doctor, where they travel back to the late 1800s and to meet Vincent van Gogh.
I've heard of this episode.
And that is possibly my favorite episode of the modern Doctor Who. And that episode, it deals with the impact that Van Gogh had, but it's heavily centered around them investigating this alien threat with his help. The Rosa Parks episode from last week is you have a threat and you have the time travel, but basically it's them trying to make sure history happens and correcting the problem, which is very much, as you said, a Quantum Leap type story, especially in the later Quantum Leap episodes.
Right.
And I was actually surprised at how little science fiction was actually in this. And then even the science fiction aspect was very much structured to play on those problems, where you find out that the villain, the whole reason, his whole motivation for this is that even though he's from several hundred years in the future, he's still human and he's still a racist. And racism will never end, but things can get better. The thing is, I actually found it a very tough episode to watch for the first half because I just had this overwhelming feeling of dread because and it was incredibly tense just because, knowing the history of what happened and what was going on in Alabama at that time and what would continue to go on for several years further with the racism and the atrocities and where people being lynched and it was very, very kind of nerve-wracking watching.
They didn't shy away from anything.
No. They make the threat to the characters, specifically the threat to the character of Ryan, is made explicit. The thing, though, is I just kept reminding myself that the Doctor Who is essentially a all-ages show, so they're not going to go too far, they're not going to go too extreme. And by the time you get to the third act was actually much more of a, I don't want to say a romp, but it got kind of close to that, where you're watching the Doctor and the companions running around and fixing things and kind of messing with people to make sure everything happens.
Yeah, it kind of turned into a madcap adventure.
And then we end up getting the incredibly somber and sobering climax of the episode, which is Rosa Parks refusing to get up out of that seat.
Right.
It was just tonally it shifted a bit, but man, that was such a good episode. And then you follow that up with last night's episode, which, as you said, giant spiders attacking the UK, and that was incredibly fun and entertaining for a completely different way.
Right.
Although even that episode had real-world political allusions, because you end up with this hotel magnate, billionaire businessman played by Chris Noth, of all people. I never would have expected Chris Noth to do an episode of Doctor Who. And his character is essentially a Donald Trump type, with allusions of running for president. So you end up, that episode ends up dealing with actual real-world issues that we're still facing today, although in a different way. But man, I am really loving this season.
It's interesting that you say that he was a Donald Trump analog, because I know it's the real-life example, but Donald Trump's just a Lex Luthor analog.
It pretty much is. The funny thing is they actually even make a mention of Donald Trump in the episode as being a rival that the Chris Noth character can't stand, which is kind of funny because he's essentially playing that type. Right.
That's sort of your Trump's so bad that even this guy, who's our fictional bad guy, can't stand him.
Yeah, basically. Supergirl was really good. Flash was really good. I'm interested in seeing where those shows are going to go. Although everything really is just in a kind of a state of setup, but Doctor Who right now is such a good show. After so many years of kind of being lukewarm on the series, after last year with series 10 and then this year series 11, these 2 years I am genuinely looking forward to each and every episode, and yeah, I can hardly wait for the next one.
Well, that's cool.
Other than that, the other thing I've done this week is I ended up actually binging The Haunting of Hill House, which I think I mentioned that I started and watched the first episode when we recorded.
You had started last week, yes.
Yeah, at that time I only got through the first episode, but I ended up binging all the rest over the next 2 days, and honestly, the show was not what I was expecting going in. Sure, it had scares and ghosts and creepiness and all that stuff, but in the end, it ended up being a really emotional TV show. You could say it was emotionally haunting. It was the kind of thing that I finished the show and it kind of stuck in my head for several days after. But yeah, it's really good, really well written. It's got extremely deep characters, and I really, really enjoyed it. I think it's one of the best TV shows I've seen in a long, long time. I understand there has been some talk of doing a second season, although I have no idea how they can do one, because it basically has a final story. The only thing I can think of is if they were going to focus on the house in a different time era with different people. But yeah, it's really good. I know you were interested in watching it. I highly recommend it. I recommend it to anyone who listens to our show.
Yeah, I'm so behind on stuff right now. I'm gonna watch it eventually, but I want to finish. I want to catch up on Flash. I want to catch up on Supergirl. I gotta watch last week's Doctor Who. I want to get caught up on Daredevil because I'm only 4 episodes into that. So there's a lot going on right now.
I am so happy that you're watching Doctor Who now, because you picked apparently the best season to start, because the show right now is just excellent. And that's me talking as a long-time Doctor Who fan.
Well, make no mistake as to why I started watching it now. I started watching it now because it was newsworthy. So I'm pleasantly surprised that I'm enjoying it as much as I am.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, Jodie Whittaker is just phenomenal. I can't believe just a few weeks ago I was unsure how she would be as the Doctor, but she is just the right blend of focused and determined whenever there's a crisis, but then scatterbrained and madcap in every other moment. I'm just enjoying the heck out of her performance. I seriously, I love this show now. Again, I should say I love the show again. But that's it for me. What have you been doing this week?
So the main thing was Doctor Who episode 3, which we just talked about. I also watched, very, very quickly, trying to get through my list of Halloween films, or at least the ones that I absolutely want to watch. I know I'm not going to get through them all. 2 of the big ones I hadn't watched were The Fly, and that's the Cronenberg 80s version. I do want to watch the 50s version again, but I usually wait and watch that one with you.
Right.
Man, good film. I'm not that big of a Cronenberg fan, and that's not to say that I dislike him. I just I haven't watched a lot of his stuff, you know?
Well, to be fair, I've only seen a couple of his movies myself, but in fact, I've never seen The Fly. But Rabid, one of his early horror films, is one that I really love. I love that movie a lot.
The Fly is just the right amount of crazy. Like, it's this goofy, kind of straight up science fiction story about making a teleportation device that just goes completely sideways after the Fly incident happens. It spends so much time setting up how it is a movie about building a teleportation device that even though it is called The Fly and it is a remake of The Fly, all the Fly stuff kind of comes out of left field in the middle of the movie. And then the movie just completely changes. Also watched Sleepy Hollow, the Tim Burton version, one that I always watch every year. I really enjoy that film. How have you described that in the past?
Oh, I remember Johnny Depp in an interview once while they were making the movie described it as Ichabod Crane, Girl Detective. Which I thought was brilliant and perfectly sums up the characterization of that film.
It's apt. We'll put it right there. It's apt. So
Sleepy Hollow is a film I enjoy, but I have not watched it in maybe a dozen years.
Never forget that there are 3 Sith Lords in that movie. You got to think
who the third is. Ray Park.
Yeah.
Christopher Lee and
Ian McDermott. What's his name? Ian McDermott.
I don't remember.
Emperor Palpatine. He's one of the town's.
I forgot that he was in.
He's one of the heads of the families in the town.
I always remembered that Ray Park was.
Ray Park is the headless horseman.
Well, for the non-riding scenes.
Right.
And Christopher Lee, I always remembered was in it because it's Christopher Lee, but
yeah, he's barely in it. He's the judge at the beginning of the movie.
Right. But Ian McDermott, I forgot that he was in that.
Yeah, I swear I didn't make that up.
I've got to watch that. It's been too long.
Sleepy Hollow. Ian McDiarmid as Thomas Lancaster, the town doctor and surgeon. So yeah, 3 Sith Lords. But plus, it's just, man, it's actually, I mean, I watched it every year, so I hadn't really thought about anything new about it in a while, but this time I happened to start thinking about it, and it's really clever how it's this haunted, almost a ghost story type thing about this undead killer, but when it comes down to it, it's like a very human murderer with a very human motivation that just so happens that their implement of murder is a supernatural being. So yeah, I find it endlessly clever. So, and it's another excuse to see Christina Ricci at Halloween. So, read some comics. Read Amazing Spider-Man number 8, which was set up for the next storyline. Nothing bad, but nothing too mind-blowing. And I also read Return of Wolverine number 2, which I have to say sort of disappointed me because I really, really liked the first issue, and this was like, yep, that's a Wolverine comic for you. It just was so, I'm going to use the word by the numbers. It just, there was nothing new or interesting or exciting about it.
That's kind of sad.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't bad by any means, but the first one really made me go, oh, wow, this is a really smart take. And the second one was just sort of like, well, there's another comic.
Yeah.
The two of us together watched Bram Stoker's Dracula, one of my all-time favorites, my favorite version of Dracula.
It's a good one.
It's so good. Gary Oldman, man, he just kills it.
The thing I like about that movie is that Francis Ford Coppola, as the director, did not even try to go for realism. The whole film feels like you're watching a fever dream.
Yeah, I remember in college, the movie had not been out for very long, and a lot of people complained about that. Like, that was a big movie to complain about. It was almost like in the late 90s when people were complaining about Phantom Menace. It was almost that level of people complaining about that film.
Really?
Yeah, and a lot of people, their complaints lied with basically the opposite of what you just said. Like, they didn't get that it was supposed to be like a fever dream. So they're like, well, what's up with this? And what's up with this? And they didn't get it, And it's like, that's the brilliance of the film, is that you can't take anything at face value at any time, because the character's the character's senses are constantly under assault, and so are yours.
One thing I really liked is the idea that they had of the vampires affecting physics around them. So you end up with this scene where the shot of the rats running across the beams upside down and water dropping upside down, Dracula crawling along the side of the castle, the brides rising out of the mattress or the bed. It's just really, at no point in the film does it feel like you're watching something that's mundane. Every moment in that movie feels like you're watching something that's just like a nightmare. It's Coppola filming an actual nightmare, and I thought that was brilliant. That's one of the things I like most about that movie. Is that, and the art direction is just incredible. By
Mike Mignola.
Oh, I forgot all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I thought he did design. I knew he did design work.
Oh yeah, you're probably right.
But yeah, because I don't think he was the art director. But yeah, I remember that he designed the bizarre-looking insect-like carapaces armor that Vlad and his soldiers are wearing at the beginning of the movie. Which, if you think about it, the armor in that film is ridiculous. It's just,
No, yeah, it's another thing in that film that's just completely out there.
Yeah.
The other thing we did was binge the original 3 Evil Dead movies, The Evil Dead, Evil Dead 2, and Army of Darkness, because I hadn't watched them in a couple of years.
Yeah, we did that in, like, what was it, like 4 hours?
Yeah, I mean, there's not one of them that's over 90 minutes, so we just watched them back to back to back, and yeah, it was like 4 hours.
Yeah, maybe a little bit longer, but yeah.
I mean, I struggle to get through the first one, I always do. There's some good stuff in there, but it's basically an art film, and it's very low budget, and it doesn't have the tone or flavor of what you come to know Evil Dead for.
Right.
So, but it does have some interesting effects, and the bones are there, of
Mhm.
what you're gonna end up getting. But
Well, the thing to me is the thing that everyone thinks of when it comes to Evil Dead is really Evil Dead 2.
oh yeah, absolutely.
That's when they finally merged and went full force with the slapstick comedy in the middle of this horrific horror movie,
Right.
and it became even more stylized.
Right, and then I think what we determined was Bruce Campbell in the first movie is in his early 20s, and he's basically a kid trying to quote unquote act. Whereas by the time they make the second one, Bruce Campbell is basically just playing himself
Yeah,
and having
Bruce
a good time
Campbell
with it.
playing Bruce Campbell. The funny thing is, you can really see the character development over the course of the series between these three movies, and how he ends up later becoming 30 years later in Ash First Evil Dead
Mm-hmm.
television show. In that, in the first film, he's just a regular guy. There's nothing really spectacular about him, but there's nothing really offensive about him. He's just, seems like a decent regular guy. He's got his girlfriend. He buys her a piece of jewelry, and he's a regular guy. There's none of what we really start to see as his quirky personality until Evil Dead 2, where the film is essentially, or at least Ash in that is, he never left the cabin at the end of the first film. He's been stuck in the cabin all this time and being driven insane. So he's much more punchy and kind of out there personality-wise and humor. And then after that, you end up going to Army of Darkness, where it's just him just being a sarcastic jerk the entire time.
Yeah, it's him being a
Almost
over-the-top action hero.
Right.
In his own mind, sort of.
Right. But a parody of an action hero.
Right.
And then by the time you get to Ash vs. Evil Dead TV show, he's basically that, but it's been like 25 plus years, and now it's no longer funny. He's kind of sad and pathetic. And if you watch Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness, but especially Evil Dead 2, Ash gets hundreds of head injuries in those movies, which to me completely justifies why he's such a moron in the TV show. Because it's 30 years later, he's gonna have serious brain damage.
Oh yeah.
What was it? You pointed out, or whenever we were watching him, you referenced a quote that Bruce Campbell said about Ash's thinking.
Oh, that Ash is, first of all, he's terrible at everything in life except for fighting the Evil Dead. And he's a terrible slow thinker, but he's a great quick thinker.
Which is perfect.
So, essentially, when he has to sit around and come up with a plan, he's no good at that. But when he just springs into action and starts doing stuff, he manages to somehow succeed.
It's funny. It's just funny to me because you can't compare Ash in the original movie to Ash in the TV show because they're basically two different characters. But you can actually see how the character goes from being one to the other.
Yeah.
I find that really fascinating because this is more than any other franchise I can think of, this one really shows a character change with each installment and becoming different and grow. I don't want to say growing, but becoming a stronger personality.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of find that fascinating.
Mm-hmm. No, you were gonna say?
No. I was gonna segue out, but if you have something else to add, go ahead.
No, I was gonna segue out.
Well, then go.
The other thing maybe I'll edit all that. The other thing that we did was watched WWE's Evolution pay-per-view. I'm not going to run down the card or anything, but I'm going to say that it was a much more solid show than I expected. I wish they would have put more promotion into it. I wish that the storyline build for the show had been more than just, it's a historic event.
Well, yeah, okay. When this was announced, what was it, back in August? I was excited. I was excited about this pay-per-view for 2 months. But then at the start of October, my excitement started to wane because it seemed like they were no longer promoting this as being a kick butt pay-per-view with, wrestling pay-per-view. And instead, we're just promoting this as a very, very important, somber thing that you need to respect. And quite frankly, what wrestling fan is interested in something like that? They stopped pushing this as being something that was going to be awesome, and then they essentially stopped promoting the matches, really, to the point where last week when Raw ended, when SmackDown ended, when NXT ended, there was no build-up, no go home for set match at the end of those episodes, setting up this pay-per-view. And then whenever we started watching the pay-per-view, I was shocked at how cheap it looked.
Oh, because it looked cheap, and quite frankly, there was a lot of lights off in the building, which leads me to believe that they didn't sell nearly as many tickets as they thought they were going to.
Well, I'm certain of that. But the thing is, WWE for years has been using those expensive-looking, heavily padded, foam-padded barriers around the ring and the ramp area. But for this, they were using the basic metal ones with some tarps with just a standard WWE logo over them that they use for house shows. They didn't even have an LED board around the ring like they always do.
Or the LED ring posts, which have been common over the last year and a half.
Yeah, it looked like we were watching a filmed house show. I was shocked by it. But the thing is, the matches were pretty much almost all pretty good. I can't really think of any match that was actually bad. The booking for the matches themselves were, on a whole, pretty good. I would have liked to have seen a few different things done during the Battle Royal. Because, man, I got excited whenever we had that brief moment where on the other side of the ring you could see Molly Holly versus Asuka, and I was just thinking, man, I want to see that as a match. But then Molly Holly ends up getting knocked out or thrown over the rope by not the Iconics, by Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville just like a minute later.
Mm-hmm.
That was really disappointing. They basically got rid of all the legends quickly, except for Ivory and Michelle McCool, of all people.
Well, no, Michelle McCool, the Undertaker's wife, not Michelle McCool, of all people.
Right. Yeah, she's the Undertaker's wife, but I'm sorry, I've never been impressed with her.
Oh, I'm not saying you should be. I'm saying that's why she was still out there.
I completely get why she was still out there. It's just Molly Holly is thrown out within like a minute of the start. I don't know. It's just depressing.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see how they manage to get by with Crown Jewel, because I was worried going into this show, and I still think they didn't handle it right, but they had a hit regardless of not handling it right.
Yeah, it was Evolution. They did not handle it right at all. It was completely mishandled, but in the end, it was a pretty good show. It wasn't one of the best pay-per-views I've ever seen, but it was a very solid pay-per-view. And if anything, it convinced me that they have enough women and a strong enough women's division to give us a weekly women's TV show.
Well, they had over 50 women performing, even though only 42 did. Mm-hmm. Or 38, or whatever we counted.
Yeah, I still think that they were counting the ring announcers and interview team.
Okay, so I wasn't, but they certainly were. That's still not over 50.
No.
All right, so before we get to our main topic, quickly want to thank everyone for coming to the Galactic Greg's fall sale and Halloween Comic Fest. We saw some great costumes. We will be making an announcement as to who won the costume contest, probably by the time you hear this podcast. So watch the Galactic Greg's Facebook for that information. And also, while you're there at the Galactic Greg's Facebook, check out the video of Jeremy and myself making our announcement for the Green Lantern Midnight Launch event party, where you can get the new Grant Morrison, Liam Sharp, The Green Lantern book for free, and enter a raffle for a chance to win an original piece of comic art by Doug Mahnke. from a Green Lantern book. So that is fairly cool, and I won't run down all the information right here because I don't have it all in front of me, but go watch that video and you'll get all the details. On to the main topic of the week. It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. This is the classic Halloween Charlie Brown TV special, originally aired October 27th, 1966 on CBS, preempting My Three Sons. It was originally sponsored by Coca-Cola and Dolly Madison Snack Cakes, and it is the third Peanuts special produced. The second with the holiday theme. A lot of people think it's the second one, but they forget about Charlie Brown's All-Stars, which was, I believe, a baseball-themed one that is largely forgotten at this point. It was nominated for 3 Primetime Emmy Awards, including Outstanding Children's Program. The other 2 were sort of technical achievement awards for the animators and for Schultz himself. Didn't win any of those, but it was interesting that it was up in the running for that. So, quickly, let's hit the plot, courtesy of Wikipedia. And for a 25-minute kids' Halloween special, the plot detail here is surprisingly long. With fall in full swing, the Peanuts gang prepares for Halloween. In the cold open, Linus and Lucy go out to the local pumpkin patch to find a pumpkin. Lucy selects the largest they can find, and poor Linus has to get it back to the house. He becomes distraught when it turns out Lucy is going to gut it to be a jack-o'-lantern. After the opening credits, Snoopy helps Charlie Brown finish raking a pile of leaves, but then Linus jumps into the heap with a large lollipop. Then Lucy entices Charlie Brown to kick a football, which has the usual results. Later, Charlie Brown gets invited to a Halloween party hosted by Violet. Neither Charlie Brown nor Lucy can believe his invitation as he breaks out into a happy dance. She assumes that he was invited by mistake. Linus is writing his yearly letter to the Great Pumpkin. Despite Charlie Brown's disbelief, Snoopy's laughter, Patty's assurance that the Great Pumpkin is a fake, and even his own sister Lucy, who threatens to pound him. She is watching TV and reading a TV guide with her picture on it, if you notice. Only Sally, Charlie Brown's younger sister, smitten with Linus, supports him. Until Charlie Brown takes her away, Linus goes out to the mailbox but cannot reach the mailbox. Lucy refuses to help him, so he lassos the mailbox handle with his security blanket, opening the box to waft in the letter. On Halloween night, the gang, including Sally, goes trick-or-treating. That's incorrect. Well, I guess they're getting to the point. Each with their own costume, most dressed as ghosts in simple white sheet costumes. Charlie Brown botches his costume, giving it too many holes because he had trouble with the scissors. Pigpen's trademark dust cloud makes him easy to identify. Lucy dresses as a witch, saying that it's the opposite of her real personality. On the way, they stop at the pumpkin patch to jeer Linus for missing the festivities, just as he did the previous year. Undeterred, Linus is convinced that the Great Pumpkin will come to his sincere pumpkin patch and tries to convince Sally to join him. Sally, acting almost entirely out of her infatuation with Linus, agrees to skip trick-or-treating. So yeah, originally they said Sally was going trick-or-treating, which didn't sound right to me. During tricks-or-treats...
They got there.
Yeah, they got there. During tricks-or-treats, the kids get their goodies, except for Charlie Brown, who gets nothing but rocks. After going back to the pumpkin patch to tease Linus and Sally, the gang goes to Violet's Halloween party. Violet and Lucy ask Charlie Brown to serve as their model, initially to his delight, then to his dismay as he learns the real reason why he was invited. The back of his round, bald head made the perfect surface to diagram potential jack-o'-lantern designs. Meanwhile, Snoopy, wearing the World War I Flying Ace costume, climbs aboard his doghouse, imagining it to be a Sopwith Camel fighter plane, to fight the Red Baron. After a fierce but losing battle, Snoopy makes his way across the countryside to briefly crash the Halloween party. He is entertained by Schroeder's playing of World War I tunes on his piano, though the sad songs make him cry. Sneaking into the apple-bobbing tank, he accidentally kisses Lucy when she picks up an apple, disgusting her and sending her into the same circling frenzy she did in Charlie Brown Christmas. Embarrassed, Snoopy leaves. Linus and Sally are still in the pumpkin patch. When Linus sees the shadowy figure rising from the moonlit patch, he assumes it's the Great Pumpkin and is there, and he faints. Sally sees that it is just Snoopy. When Linus wakes, she furiously yells at him for making her miss the Halloween festivities as Charlie Brown and the others come to get her. As they leave, Linus, still convinced the Great Pumpkin will materialize, promises to put in a good word for them if he comes. He then panics as he had said if instead of when. At 4 o'clock the next morning, Lucy realizes that Linus is not on his bed. She finds her brother in the pumpkin patch, shivering in his clothes, huddled under his blanket, and half asleep. She brings him home, takes off his shoes, and puts him to bed. When daylight comes, Charlie Brown and Linus lean against the wall and commiserate about the previous night's disappointments. Charlie Brown attempts to console his friend by saying that he's done a lot of stupid things in his life too. This infuriates Linus, who begins to vow that the Great Pumpkin will come to the pumpkin patch next year. Charlie Brown listens with an annoyed look on his face as the credits roll. So even as a little kid watching this, I always wondered how terrible are Linus and Lucy's parents that they went to bed that night without realizing that Linus was in the house.
It's a good question. How terrible are the parents or adults in any of these Peanut specials, especially this one? You have adults giving a child rocks.
I'd like to hope.
Just mean.
I'd like to hope that some of those were teenagers, but yeah, like Charlie Brown's misfortune is always a source of humor in Peanuts, but here that misfortune comes as a direct result of mean adults.
Yeah,
it's not something like the classic Charlie Brown trying to kick the football bit is Lucy being mean, so it's another kid being mean to him. But this is adults handing out candy. 6 kids come to the door. Every kid gets candy except one who gets a rock, and he gets a rock at every house.
It's the same kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's shocking.
I mean, did all the adults get together and say, "Oh, if you see anyone in a terrible costume, give them a rock instead of candy"? Could you imagine? Could you imagine as a child going trick-or-treating, and if you would have gotten home with 1 rock in your bag instead of candy?
Yeah, it's... Oh, gosh. Oh, okay. You know how Scooby-Doo and Shaggy represent the most perfect example of cowards in children's fiction? Or
Yeah.
at least in cartoons? Charlie Brown is basically the child's comic book or comic strip version of Job, just constantly beaten down by fate.
Yeah.
But in this, it's specifically adults that are targeting him, and they have to be deliberately targeting him, which is just, yeah, it's nuts.
And I think the honest intent by Charles Schultz here is showing, look what the world is doing to him.
Mm.
He can't win. Look what the world is doing to him. It's just that if you dissect it, it doesn't get there unless an adult is throwing a rock at a kid's Halloween bag.
Well, okay, the thing about it is the original intent, and we discussed this the other day, was that Charles Schultz's plan was that Charlie Brown gets a rock, and that's it. But then I think it was Bill Melendez came up with the idea that he gets 3 rocks, thinking that would be funnier. And it is funny.
Oh, it's definitely funny.
Frankly. It's the rule of 3. Things are always funny when they're in 3s. But that's just if it was the 1 rock, that would be an example of what Schultz, I think, was going for with the character, where it was just like the world just seems to just, for whatever reason, to be against him.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's the 3 rocks, and it's implied that it was nothing but rocks the entire night, that's systematic.
Well, he says later to Linus, I spent all night trick-or-treating and all I got was a bag full of rocks. That
is a conspiracy of the entire town of adults to purposely target this one kid who's really not bad.
He could be being hyperbolic here, but I'm going to believe him and think that nothing was in his bag except rocks.
It's Charlie Brown. Charlie Brown usually does exaggerate his misfortune. He is an incredibly unfortunate character, but he does always exaggerate. That is true.
I mean, they're also supposed to be, between 5 and 8, so...
Right, yeah, and all kids that age exaggerate.
Right.
But yeah, it's just, wow. If it's all the adults, that is one massive, bizarre, and peculiar conspiracy.
I've always liked that this is not just a Halloween special, but is also sort of a fall season special with, the raking leaves sequence and the playing football sequence and going to get the pumpkin, which is Halloween related, but not Halloween night activity. One of my favorite bits in the whole thing is the never jump into a pile of leaves with a wet sucker. It's just, and it's nothing to do with Halloween. It's funny watching them, have a
Oh, yeah.
fall moment, you know.
My favorite joke in this episode, or rather this special, is definitely where the whole kicking the football thing ends, and Lucy convinces Charlie Brown because she wrote out and signed a document specifying that she would let him kick the ball. And then, so he has the document, and of course he runs, goes for the kick, she pulls it, and he falls, landing on his back. And then she walks over and says, "The strange thing about this, it wasn't notarized."
Which, as a child, was how I found out what something being notarized meant.
Oh, yeah. Actually reminds me of an anecdote. I used to read For Better or For Worse when I was growing up,
Uh-huh.
which is, a very famous Canadian comic strip. Lynn Johnson, who wrote and drew For Better or For Worse, I think she did, I can't remember exactly what it was. I think she wrote the foreword to a Peanuts collection that was in tribute to Charles Schulz that I read at one point. And in it, she talked about how Schulz was, later he would become her mentor, but originally he was, Peanuts was the comic strip that inspired her to get into cartooning herself.
Mm-hmm.
But in it, she gave an anecdote that when she was a kid growing up, her father did not like her reading Peanuts because the father hated it because, according to him, those kids in that comic strip did not speak like kids. And that's never bothered me. I've always thought that was really funny. That was one of the characteristic things about Peanuts that was so great.
Oh yeah, I mean, the Christmas special, the whole point of Linus being like the master theologian is for this to be coming out of a child. Right.
These are kids that are still very much kids, worried and obsessed with kid issues and problems, but they're also philosophical. And the idea that Lucy would say that the document wasn't notarized is absurd, but that's what the comedy is. That's what makes it funny. So I've never really gotten the complaint that, well, they don't talk like regular kids. Well, they're not regular kids.
They're not supposed to talk like regular kids.
Yeah. It's they deal with philosophical stuff while also dealing with things that are universal to children everywhere. First love, going away to camp, you're having a problem not getting invited to the Christmas party, or not getting candy for Halloween, or being the only kid in your class that didn't get a Valentine's. I mean, that's universal stuff. That's always been the genius of Peanuts to me, and why it's always it has the longevity it has.
Mm-hmm. Because
it's both. It's something that adults can read and enjoy, but it's also relatable to kids. And it's also just to throw in, it also has the really strong personalities. The thing that's funny is when you and I were watching this the other day, and the very opening sequence is Lucy and Linus going to the pumpkin patch, and then Linus picking up a pumpkin, Lucy just shaking her head no, Linus picking up a bigger pumpkin, Lucy getting annoyed, shaking her head no, Linus picks up an even bigger one, and that's the one she wants. And then they walk back while Linus is struggling carrying this pumpkin, and Lucy's not doing anything to help. And then they get stuck at the fence, so he starts rolling the pumpkin to get it back to the house. And all this time, Lucy is completely annoyed with Linus, even though he's the one doing all the work. And I said to you, it's my relationship with my older sister.
And I said to you, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I'm exaggerating, but not by much. I might be doing her a little bit of a disservice, but yeah, that's because that was the thing. When I was a kid, one of my mom's nicknames for me was Linus, because my sister and I had a similar relationship to the characters of Lucy and Linus, and everywhere I went, I carried around a security blanket and we had a dog when I was very young, named Princess, and she would fight with me in tug of war over my blanket all the time. So yeah, ever since I was a little kid, I have always related to Linus. Plus, I'm a little bit too philosophical for my own good.
That you are. So yeah, I don't know how much we've ever gotten into this on the show, but Peanuts and these Charlie Brown specials were absolutely 100% my thing, the thing that I was known for as a child. As far back as I can remember, I was reading these comics and watching these specials. And as far back as I could remember, I had, Charlie Brown bed sheets and pictures hanging in my room. And when I first started to draw, that's what I was drawing. And I loved Snoopy, and I had a stuffed Snoopy for as long as I can remember when I was younger. My mom constantly reminds me of one time we went, because we also never got into too much on the show that I had a lot of health problems as a kid. My mom always relates a story that we went to the doctor one time, and I recited the entire Snoopy versus the Red Baron by the Royal Guardsmen for the doctor at like age 4 or 5. and she always ends the story with, nobody could believe that you knew every word of that song. So yeah, so I think this one, more than the Christmas special, is the one that I remember really, really watching and really enjoying and making sure I saw it every year. Although I had almost all the specials on VHS at some point and watched them all repeatedly. This is probably my favorite one. And the big reason for that is that I love the Snoopy World War I Flying Ace stuff. And, man, that World War I Flying Ace sequence in this special, it's been called Bill Melendez's animation masterpiece. I think it's one of the most memorable things ever done in animation. I think it's on par with a Steamboat Willie type thing. It is a definitive animated moment for Peanuts. It's so simple the way they do it. They would try to recreate it in subsequent specials and on various cartoon TV series that were made later. Never to the same effect, but it's just done perfectly. And it amazes me that, as you said, they don't talk like kids. It amazes me that Charlie Brown has such a working knowledge of World War I aviation to narrate this, except that then I had such a working knowledge of World War I aviation because of watching this and then wanting to know more about it.
Yeah, I was going to save it till the end, but yeah, it's the Great Pumpkin. Charlie Brown is, I believe, my favorite Charlie Brown Peanut special. I think I like it more than the Charlie Brown Christmas.
It's really close for me because I really do love Charlie Brown Christmas.
Well, I do too. It's just that one feels rougher, and it feels like
it is rougher. It's the first one.
It's the first one. I don't think they had the confidence to try to do what they wanted to do and succeeded, but I think there was a bit more of an uncertainty in it. Whereas this one, they know what the characters are, they know what they're doing, and everything in it works. There is no wasted moment, and I think it's funnier.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is they figured out better techniques for working with the kids, because they had actual kids read these lines. And, I mean, think about what I said. Charlie Brown narrates this big World War I aerial battle sequence, and I'm guessing the actor was around 10 at the time of making the special. So this was made in 1966, and Peter Robbins was born in 1956, so he would have been 10. So yeah, you got these. He would have been 8, probably like 8 then when they did Charlie Brown Christmas. You got to get these kids to relate these lines and make them believable. But it's probably a lot of stuff that, can you imagine like being Linus doing Charlie Brown Christmas, doing the big Bible verse thing? It's stuff that they're not gonna quite understand what they're saying, and they never went to the sort of like modern type thing of having an adult voice actor.
Right.
Which was something that was great in the Peanuts movie, because they stayed true to this and cast a bunch of kids.
Well, my understanding is that it was normal to use adults to voice children even back then.
No, yeah, it was.
That's what made the Peanuts specials so unique, is that they actually used kids. The thing I was also going to say is, even aside from the technical issues that they had with the original compared to this one being much more polished, it's that I think there's a little bit too much sentiment in
Charlie Brown Christmas.
Charlie Brown Christmas.
I understand that argument.
I think there is a lot more bite in It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown.
Okay, so part of that is many of the gags in Great Pumpkin are lifted from the comic strip.
Right.
This is the first one that really feels like a bunch of different strips put together with a added plot to tie it all together. You know, not that there's not gags from the strip in Charlie Brown Christmas, but Charlie Brown Christmas feels much more like an original story, whereas Great Pumpkin feels like, oh, we did all these great jokes for the last 12 years, or actually at this point 16 years of October strips. We've established this whole Great Pumpkin thing. Let's just take the best jokes that we've done and put it together into this special.
Right, but this is what makes it work better for me.
No, I'm agreeing with you, absolutely.
Because the Christmas one feels underwritten, because they're trying to write specifically for the screen, so there's not really a lot that actually happens in it. Whereas this one feels like you are actually watching the comic strip animated. It feels much more strongly like the comic strip, which is, I think, a marked improvement over Charlie Brown Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to check my notes for other things I wanted to bring up. Yeah, okay. I don't know how else to fit this in, but I'm just going to mention it now. One of the things I like about this one, as I said, it has a lot more bite to it. But one of the things I also like in it is Charlie Brown is a little more aggressive in this one. What I mean by that is he gets visibly angry at several different points in this, and almost threatening. You know, like the raised fist, like he's going to hit Linus at one point early in it.
Uh-huh.
The whole thing where he gets cross and, you know, he has lines like, "You must be crazy." It's just... Charlie Brown's more punchy in this one than he is in any of the others that I can think of seeing. Usually he's the sad sack, but
right.
This one he's much more... Yeah, he's still the sad sack. It's Charlie Brown, but yeah, there's more bite to the character, and then I love the look on his face when at the Halloween party, and then they start drawing on the back of his head, and then the camera shot changes to show his face, and he's like furious.
Oh yeah, that's great.
What's great is any other Charlie Brown special, I would imagine the look on his face to be embarrassment. But in this one, it's basically impotent rage, because he is angry. He is furious at several points in this special. But he never does anything about it, because he's Charlie Brown.
Right.
I don't know. I love this one. I think this is their masterpiece.
Yeah, I mean... everything's there in Charlie Brown Christmas, but everything's there to a level of, we're trying something, we're lucky that it worked, but we didn't master any of it yet. No. And a mere two specials later, I think they hit the high point with this special. Just giving Snoopy more to do, giving, they kind of do the thing that they did in Charlie Brown Christmas, where like several characters pair off and have little scenes together. You know, that's stuff that all works, and it works the best in this particular special. They just managed to pull it off.
Yeah, they would have other Peanuts specials that would be really, really good, and there would be ones that would be kind of, I don't want to say middle of the road, but more just not really memorable.
I always call them the scrub ones.
Scrub ones.
Because having them on DVD, it's always like Charlie Brown Christmas and some Scrub episode, and Charlie Brown Thanksgiving and some Scrub episode.
But this is the high point. That nothing that came after this comes close, or at the very least matches this one. I don't think. See, the thing is, I grew up with Charlie Brown and Peanuts and all of that myself. I used to watch the specials. I used to get the Peanuts collections,
Mm-hmm.
the little book collections. So Charlie Brown and Peanuts was a major thing when I was a kid, but not to the level that it was for you. But it was something that I was always aware of. We even have a slight family connection because my dad, whenever him and his family lived in Southern California, or was it Northern California? I'm trying to remember where Santa Rosa is. When he lived in California back in the 60s, my dad briefly went to school, college courses and that, with Charles Schultz's wife, and my dad was one of the, they were like, friends and that, to a degree. I mean, not like big friends, but school friends.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was one of a number of students that were invited to a party at the Schultz's house. And my dad went, and Charles Schultz gave each of them signed and personalized copies of Charlie Brown Christmas hardcover book that was published. This is like, 1966 or 1967. So that was the thing. So when I was a kid, my dad always had this book that was on the bookcase that you could go and flip through and look at. So it was always kind of neat. I mean, really, it's nothing major, but it was just kind of a nice little memento.
No, I can't tell you how amazing I think that story is. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, the connection actually even goes a little bit weirder, because my dad's family lived in this house that they later found was the original family home for Robert Ripley of Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Uh-huh.
And Ripley's Believe It or Not is the comic strip, newspaper strip, where Charles Schultz as a child had his first published work, because he submitted a drawing and a little story about his dog.
Right.
And it's just weird that my dad would end up living in that house, and then end up with Robert Ripley's house, and then end up meeting Charles Schultz.
I know Schultz's background. I read his biography when I was 6.
I'm just saying.
I'm that kid.
Yeah, it's just this weird little thing.
And by the way, if you want a bad Peanuts special, I submit to you either it's the girl in the red truck Charlie Brown or Why Charlie Brown Why, because oh my god, they're both horrendous.
The thing is, I used to watch a lot of the specials when I was a kid, and repeats and everything like that. I think at one point they were even were they re-airing them almost like a Saturday morning cartoon series?
Well, there was a Saturday morning cartoon series, but I feel like sometimes they would just show some of the old specials in the same time slot. Okay.
So I used to watch that also, and it's just, the thing is, this is stuff that I was really interested in and watched a lot, and I read the strips and everything like that really back in the 80s when I was a kid, and I haven't really watched the specials since. I think I watched a couple of the early 90s ones when they originally aired, but by that point I stopped paying attention or really noticing whenever they made a new special. I didn't start to really kind of get back interested in watching the specials until you and I started watching a couple of them, Christmas or Halloween like this, it's been 3.5 years now,
right?
Something like that. Since we started hanging out over Skype, because I mean we've been friends online before Skype since 2000, 2001, 2002, around there.
Right.
And yeah, it's just I can't remember what it was, but yeah, I think it was back in the summer talking about music it's basic. Like whenever I delve back into this stuff, it's like rediscovering parts of my childhood I've forgotten about. And yeah, it's just it's fun. I think I had some Peanuts toys when I was a kid, but I don't really strongly remember. Didn't I swear I had a little rubber plastic Snoopy that was similar to the Smurfs that they used to make.
Oh yeah, I had a bunch of those.
But I think I only had the one.
Like the PVC type figures?
Right.
Yeah, I had a bunch of those.
And I think I had something with Linus because, again, I was Linus. My older sister is a big fan of Peanuts. She's got like several different mugs with the Peanuts characters on them, and some of the toys, the collectibles they've been doing over the years. But yeah,
I have a coffee mug for every day of the week, and one of them is Star Wars, and all the other ones are either Charlie Brown or Snoopy or Peanuts related. So
I have a Linus Hallmark mug, which is on one of my bookcases, which I've never used. Oh wait, no, I moved it into the kitchen, but I've never used it. My sister uses it occasionally. I just moved it in there because that's where she has her Linus and Charlie Brown ones.
I have a Charlie Brown Christmas tree, which is going up in like 3 days. So
yeah, it's just funny.
Oh, and yes, the two that I named, Why Charlie Brown Why is the one where they find out one of their friends is dying of cancer. So that one's a laugh riot.
Oh my god.
That one is gotta be early 90s?
Oh, I can't imagine the sad.
1990.
Really?
1990. So I didn't see that one live. The one that I did see live was It's the Girl in the Red Truck, Charlie Brown, which is basically about Spike, Snoopy's brother, the one that lives in the desert.
I know who Spike is.
Well, I'm explaining it to our listeners as well.
Oh, I apologize.
You're not the only one here, Derek. Yes, it's Spike falling in love with a girl driving a truck. Everything in the special is live action except for Spike, and the music is just, the whole thing feels like it feels like you're watching a snuff film. It feels like you're waiting for this girl to die at the end of the episode. It is horrible, and the girl is played by Schultz's daughter, so that makes it even worse because you're like waiting for his daughter to die.
What year is this one?
It was like, it literally aired on TV like 2 weeks before Roger Rabbit hit the theaters.
So 88.
Where's the date? The Wikipedia page is not giving the exact date, but they're saying that it aired right before. It suffered due to its release just weeks before the popular theatrical release feature Who Framed Roger Rabbit. September 27th, 1988.
That makes it sound like they made that special purposely to try to.
They might have.
Try to get in on the Roger Rabbit bandwagon, and that, to me, that implies it was made fast and cheap.
It was. I remember watching this one live. It was bad.
Yeah, I have no memory of that one. The cancer one sounds vaguely familiar.
Which came right after this one. I mean, not right after. It was 2 years later, but it was the next one. Production of the film took 4 years and cost millions of dollars. A serious film buff who watched both foreign and art films, Schultz commented that he wanted this to be his Citizen Kane, but it was not. That's Schultz's quote. I wanted this to be my Citizen Kane, but it's not.
4 years to make The Girl in the Red Truck.
Yes.
Oh my god! It sounds. It does not sound like something that would have taken 4 years.
It's bad. It is bad. And like I said, I've only seen bits and pieces of the cancer one because I was in high school at the time. I don't think I saw it when it aired, but
depending on where it was, depending on when it aired in 1990, I was either in grade 8 or grade 9.
Oh yeah, I guess it would have been when I was in grade 8 because it's March.
Okay, yeah, that would have been my last year in junior high.
But and there's also a it's Arbor Day, Charlie Brown. So like, if you ever needed that in your life, and that's one of the early ones even. So
it's Flag Day, Charlie Brown.
I think that's actually one.
Oh my god, it's a joke. No, I'm not gonna lie. I'm right now considering trying to find the Girl in the Red Truck online. So watch it right after this.
Okay, so there is a level of I've built up in my head how bad it was all these years. I haven't seen it since it originally aired.
It's probably one of those things where you end up watching it and you find out, well, it's not that bad. It's just simply mediocre.
Yeah, I do remember, and I have read that it had like a terrible negative reaction when it was released. So
I can't believe it's. I'm looking at it on Wikipedia. It's the 32nd animated special for Peanuts.
That is not Jack Torrance hacking at the door. That is my cat trying to get in the room. Apparently, he doesn't see the recording session sign up.
Apparently not.
So yeah, back to after that little diversion, back to good Charlie Brown specials. Yeah, I don't know what else we can say about this one except to move on to our ratings.
All right. Do you want me to go first then?
That is usually the format.
All right. Yeah, I love this. This is my favorite Charlie Brown special. I'm giving it 5 stars. I think this is the peak. I think this is the best they've done. They've done a lot of good since. The Charlie Brown Christmas was good, great even. But to me, this is it. This is the best of the best.
Yeah, not only do I think this is the best special they made, I think this is the pinnacle of my Peanuts fandom. This encapsulates everything I love about Peanuts, both, all the crazy Snoopy stuff, the World War I stuff, the Great Pumpkin himself, Linus being both smart and stupid at the same time, which is a trait I love about Linus, and which he does get lost in, or he loses that trait a little bit later, where he's just smart because people think of him as being this fountain of wisdom in Charlie Brown Christmas. But the whole idea in this was like when he first started doing the Great Pumpkin stuff in the comic strip, Schultz describes it simply as a matter of he's a little kid, he confused two things and conflated them.
Right.
So he's conflating Santa Claus with Halloween, and he came up with his own thing.
Yeah. The thing is, this is the what I didn't touch on it quite exactly, but one of the things I love about this one is that it's such a strong story for Linus. And as I was saying, I self-identified with Linus a lot growing up, and not even just self-identified. As I said, I was Linus, according to my mom, and I was that kid who could be philosophical and say things that adults would be shocked at and amazed, where people would tell my parents, I can't believe your son's that smart. And then the next thing I would do something really foolish or naive because I was a kid.
Right.
Linus was me. That's who I was. So yeah, I really strongly identify with this one just because Linus, smartest kid around, but also just incredibly naive and yeah.
Yeah, I think I probably have a level of Linus in me as well.
Blind optimism.
That doesn't sound like you at all.
Well, the older I get, the more I'm becoming Charlie Brown.
So if I didn't say it, 5 stars for me as well. Yeah, this is the pinnacle of my Peanuts fandom. But hey, you know what? I also recommend go out and watch the Peanuts movie because it was fantastic. And a lot of it's tribute to the stuff that's already good and rehashes of the stuff that's already good, but they did it in a really good way. So
yeah, I have to rewatch it. I've only watched it the one time when I got the Blu-ray.
The year that came out, it was the same year that Force Awakens came out. And I was actively telling people I was more excited for the Peanuts movie than Force Awakens.
I can see that.
It meant more to me.
Oh, yeah.
Both movies I sat in the theater grinning from ear to ear, just a kid again enjoying. But yes. All right, so we're going to do a quick question of the week. And that is a game of Halloween horror movie either or. And Derek, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you these either ors, and you're going to give us your opinion.
Are you going to follow up with your own opinion?
Yeah, I'm sure I'll comment as well.
All right.
Okay, so there's a handful of these. So this won't take long. So the first one is slasher or paranormal?
Oh, that's easy. Paranormal.
Yeah, I would go with Paranormal as well. I've never been that big of a slasher fan, which we discussed when we watched Halloween a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, there are slasher movies that I really like, but on a whole, I love and I'm not borderline, but low key obsessed with the paranormal.
The Howling or Silver Bullet.
The Howling. That is a great movie.
I've actually not seen either. So
I've got the Howling on DVD. It's a terrific movie. What is it? Was it Joe Dante?
I believe so.
I think it was. Silver Bullet. I have not seen since I was 10 or 11. But yeah, Howling's great.
Pink Floyd or Iron Maiden.
I like Iron Maiden, but I gotta go with Pink Floyd.
These are both bands that I enjoy, but neither are like super high on my list. My gut is to say Iron Maiden, but when I put a little bit of thought into it, I think I have to go with Pink Floyd because I think there's more Pink Floyd songs that I like than Iron Maiden songs. There's probably a handful of Iron Maiden songs that I like more than anything Pink Floyd's done, but sheer volume, I gotta give it to Pink Floyd. Godzilla or King Kong?
I'm going to go with King Kong. King Kong meant more to me when I was a kid.
I'm going to go with Godzilla for the same reason. Slightly humorous one. Tom Cruise's The Mummy or Paper Cut?
I'm going to go with The Mummy. I mean, it can't be that bad.
Yeah, I'm going to quote what our friend Dan said last night. Paper cuts aren't that bad. So...
Who was it that said that? I think it was Dan quoting someone else said that someone said, I've had a paper cut. I've never seen the Mummy.
Oh no, that was just one of the comments on this post when we found it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was. I've had a paper cut before. I've never experienced the Tom Cruise Mummy. So, Bram Stoker's Dracula or 30 Days of Night?
I've never seen 30 Days of Night. I don't really have any interest in it, but I'm going to go with Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah, I've also never seen 30 Days of Night, but Bram Stoker's Dracula is both my favorite Dracula movie and one of my favorite horror movies, so I'm going to go with Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Bram Stoker's Dracula also has one of my favorite movie moments, but I'm not going to mention what it is on this podcast.
I know what it is.
You know what it is.
Jason or Freddy?
This one's tough. Freddy is funnier, but I don't know. I just love the idea of Jason being this unstoppable Frankenstein-like golem, and just the imagery of this like behemoth monster that's with the mask. I'm gonna go with Jason.
Yeah, based almost entirely on playing them in the Mortal Kombat games, I'm gonna go with Jason. Craven or Carpenter?
Carpenter. Wes Craven has a few movies I really like, but Carpenter has a few movies I love.
Yeah, I've said on this show several times that I'm not a Carpenter fan. However, I can't think of anything by Wes Craven that I like, so I'm going to say Carpenter.
Wes Craven, the two things I like the most are the original Nightmare on Elm Street and Wes Craven's New Nightmare from 1994.
Yeah.
I love those two movies, but not nearly as much as I love Halloween or Big Trouble in Little China, which is one of my top 10 favorite movies.
Right. The Ring or The Grudge?
I think... Okay, I'm assuming that they're referring to the American remakes.
I would assume.
If it's the American remakes, The Ring is the better film, but The Grudge has the better ghost and scares. So The Grudge.
I would rather put my eyes out than subject myself to either of these films again.
I own them on DVD.
Alien or The Thing?
Alien, no contest.
Yeah, and The Thing bores me to tears. Actually, that's unfair. I watched The Thing. I've seen The Thing exactly one time, and I just kind of sat there watching it going, okay, this is The Thing.
I think yeah, it's a thing. The Thing. I think The Thing is a really good movie, and I really enjoy it, but Alien, I think, is a better movie.
Yeah, I mean, and Aliens is my favorite film, and you don't get there without Alien. So yes, I'm going with Alien.
Plus, Alien also features Sigourney Weaver as Ellen Ripley, and that Ellen Ripley is my third favorite movie character.
And my first favorite, so. Evil Dead or Night of the Living Dead.
I'm assuming that they're referring to the original Evil Dead film, and if so, I'm going with Night of the Living Dead.
I've never seen any of the Living Dead movies, and I like Evil Dead, so I'm going to go with Evil Dead. Here's one that we had to do research on, and I still can't really give you an answer. Pazuzu or Paimon? I don't know who Paimon is. You did a little bit of research last night and got spoiled on an upcoming movie. So
Yeah, so I'm going with Pazuzu, the demon from The Exorcist.
I'm going with Pazuzu entirely because he is also the gargoyle demon from Futurama, and we get to have the professor going, Pazuzu! Lake Placid or Tremors?
Tremors. I love that movie. That's a great movie.
As much as I want to vote for Betty White, yeah, Tremors. I haven't even seen Tremors probably since like 95 or so. Like, it's been forever, but it left such a, like you always, you don't forget that movie, you know?
Tremors was one, when it came out, we rented it on video. My family and my siblings and I just loved that movie. And I used to watch it a lot, then got it on DVD, and then I ended up getting it for Blu-ray for Christmas a couple of years ago. I love that movie. That movie is phenomenal.
The Monster Squad or Hocus Pocus?
Monster Squad.
Yeah, we did an episode about Monster Squad. How can we...
Yeah. Well, part of the problem is Hocus Pocus isn't our generation.
Yeah, that's true. I know a lot of people that really love that movie. And every year I think I should probably buy that for Halloween, because it's like $12 right now on Blu-ray.
Right.
You know, but I've never gotten into it.
I bought it on DVD. I had seen it when it originally came out because I have younger siblings, and I bought it on DVD at a Halloween sale a few years ago for like, I don't know, $8. It's not bad. I enjoy watching it. It's amusing, but I just it was aimed at a younger generation than me. Monster Squad, though, I think Monster Squad has, to use a phrase I've been using several times tonight, a little more bite.
Yeah.
Plus, I love the monster design, so it's no contest.
Frankenstein or Dracula? Now, do they mean the characters, or do they mean the original Universal movies? If they mean the characters, I go with Dracula. If they mean the movies themselves, as produced by Universal, I think Frankenstein's a better film. So
I'm going to go with Frankenstein.
And finally, The Lost Boys or Fright Night.
This one's tough. I could go with either one. I don't know. This one's... You know what? We briefly discussed this list the other day. I said Fright Night as my choice. I'm changing it to The Lost Boys because I think The Lost Boys is just slightly more fun.
I've never seen Fright Night, and I quite enjoy Lost Boys, so I'm going to go with Lost Boys. So that was that, and with that being done, we will get out of here. Remember that you can send us email, DerekandMattLoveComics@gmail.com, Facebook.com/DerekandMatt. You can find us on Twitter @DerekandMatt, on Instagram @DerekandMatt, on YouTube, Derek and Matt Love Comics channel, and you can find us on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, Google Play, and TuneIn. Please subscribe and give us a rating or review on iTunes. Hey, we're really looking for feedback. Part of the reason we're making some changes around here, because we think we're doing a good job, and we think we know what we're doing. And I talk to a lot of you in person who seem to like what I'm doing, but we don't ever get feedback through the email channels or on the Facebook channel and a Facebook feed. We'd love to hear some actual feedback we can read on the air, and maybe it'll shape the show. For any information on Galactic Gregs, visit galacticgregs.com or facebook.com/galacticgregs. Remember to check out about the Green Lantern Midnight Launch Party that is coming up next week on Derek and Matt Love Comics. Derek, what are we doing?
We need to find a better way or better name for this episode, but next week it's going to be top 5 favorite depictions of superheroes in live action movies.
Yeah, and that's going to be a hard list. So
I have at least 2 or 3 that jump out immediately to mind.
Yeah, I have a feeling that my immediate thought is we're going to have a lot the same, and then the more I thought about it, I'm thinking we might actually end up with being vastly different.
It's possible. I think there is going to be some overlap, but I can't imagine anyone would not be able to guess my number one.
Music for this episode, Hero Theme and Adventure Meme by Kevin MacLeod, Incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. Derek, any last words?
There are three things that I've learned never to discuss with people: religion, politics, and the Great Pumpkin.
I got a rock.